Hello everybody. Today we are going to have a look at SceneKit and some of its functionalities. This is a game technology. However, it can be used for other kinds of apps, for instance educational apps. I have myself a 3D app based on SceneKit in the App Store. It's called Rad 3D and it's about bicycle wheel building. We concentrate mostly here on how to take screenshots of the 3D view, convert them into images that can be shared in various contexts such as other apps or even social media. We are going to concentrate on the SCNView class. This is a container for all 3D objects. It can have a background color according to these properties, background color, and can retrieve a static image of the 3D view with a snapshot function. Once we have some images, we're going to share them around with a UI activity view controller, which is a class designed to share objects and determine the destination suitable for these objects based on their class. It has a rich graphical interface and presents all available options to the user. To demonstrate these technologies, we're going to create a small app which should create images of its 3D objects. For each image, different versions with black, white, or transparent background will be created. The user can then view these images, select one, and be able to share it. We open Xcode and we create a new project using the game template with a SceneKit. Give it a name and save it somewhere. So I save it on the desktop in this case. Now what I would like to do is to use only the landscape orientation, so it looks more like a 3D app. Go to the storyboard. We have to replace the original SCN view with a normal UI view in order to be able to put controls for navigation. So here we remove the SCN view, we have a normal view, and we put back another SCN view which will contain our 3D context. So this is another SCN view. We put it inside the main view and we use the constraints to put it at full screen on any device. Now, because we have a UI view as our main view, we are able to add a normal button. This we're going to use for navigation. We call this button share. We set its color to white and we add some animation to let it stand out better. And we have to use, of course, some constraints so that it will be in the same position on any device. Now let's go back to the controller and we have to put back the SCN view that we created because we removed it before, so now we have to put it back somehow. So we create an outlet with a new SCN view. We give it a name to this variable. We go back to a better view of the code. Now we have to replace some code in order to reflect our changes. Here the SCN view was before the main view, now it's a sub view, so we change it accordingly. We remove also some features that are not needed for our project, such as this animation and the tap gesture we can remove. We set the show statistic to false, and we get rid also of this function here to handle the tap gesture, which we don't need. Next, we enforce the landscape only orientation in any case. Let's go back to the storyboard, and we can create a new scene for sharing images. We put a normal view controller. We embed it in a navigation controller so that we can have a navigation bar. And we can now create already a segue from the button share to our new scene. This segue needs to have an identifier so that we can use it later in the code. We call it share segue. Now let's populate our view. We need UI image view because we are going to handle images, so we put it inside our main view, much as we did before with our SCN view. And like before, we put it at full screen with the necessary constraints. We set the background to light gray. This is important because we want to create different view with different backgrounds. If the view doesn't have any background, so that the background is transparent, it's going to be to show as gray because it's a see-through background. Now we put a toolbar for some controls to select which kind of image we want to share. So this toolbar has to be pinned to the main view with proper constraints. We remove now the default item and we replace it with a segmented control. To indicate that we have different options, and we set the control to 3 segments. One is for the black background view image, so we call it black. Then the second one is the transparent background, so we call it blank. And the third one, of course, is the white background. Now let's go to the navigation bar, and we have 2 buttons. One is to go back to the main view. We use the stop icon, and the other one is to do the sharing of the images, so we use the famous action icon. Now the graphic part is pretty much set. Now we have to implement our controller class. So we create a new file with a new class of subclass of view controller. We call it share view controller. So it shows here. Go back to the storyboard and set the class of our view controller to this new class that we created. Now we're going to handle the controller and its connection to the view. So let's put them side by side. First thing we do is to create an array to contain our images with the different backgrounds. So we call this image set, and it is a standard array of images. Then we create an index variable to contain whichever image is selected. We call it selected, and we set it to 0 for to start our view. Now we can make connection to the view elements. So we create an outlet for our image view. We call it the EMG view. Next, a bunch of actions to be connected to our controls. Let's start with segmented control. This is connected to an action originating from a segmented control. The action we call select action. So this is going to be used to select whichever image we want to share. Now we have the go back action to go back to the main view. Here we don't need to select any special type because it's a very simple function, and we call it go back. Finally, we have the share action. Which does the actually sharing of the image to whatever operation we want to use. The type of this object originating the action is a bar button item. So this is useful later, as you will see. Let's go back to a better view of the controller code, and we can start populating our functions. The go back function is very simple. We just dismiss the current view controller with an animation. This will bring us back to the original main view. Next thing we need to do is to create a simple convenience function to handle the presentation of the images within the image view. We call this function set image. It has no parameters, and what it does is to set the image of the image view to whatever image is selected using the array and the selection index, which as a default to start is set to 0. we can use this now for the initial presentation of the view in the function viewDidLoad. So this will set the image to the first one in the array. Now we go back to our segmented control and we use it to set this selected variable to whichever index has been selected by the user. And we accordingly update the view with our setImageConvenience function. Finally, we implement our shareAction function. We create here a controller of type UI activity view controller, which is designed to share objects in to other apps and other destinations. So this has a constructor which takes a set of objects of items to share. In our case, what we have to do is to use the image that is selected at the moment. So we create an array and we put in this array one object which is taken from our array of images depending on the selection index. I hope that's clear. Finally, we have just to present this activity controller with the present view controller function with animation if we want to, and no special completion action. Now our share view controller is ready. What we do next is to set up some navigation in the original view controller. So here it is, our game view controller. First, we create again some convenience function. This function is going to extract a static image from our 3D context. The parameter we use is a color, so we want to have any background color that we wish, and the return type is a UI image. Now we get our SCN view. We copy to a local constant for good practice. We set its background color with a property background color to whichever color we pass as a parameter to this function. Finally, we return an image using the function snapshot, which is made just for that. So this is our convenient functions. It retrieves whatever object is shown in 3D with a background of our choice. Now we do a navigation function using the segue, the prepare for segue function. Here we have to make sure that our segue is the right one. So we take the identifier and check if it's equal to the one we set before for our segue, which was called share segue. Of course, in this case, it's not critical because we only have one segue, but in normal apps we have to check each time that we get the right segue. Now we create a controller based on the segue information. Here is a bit complex, so please bear with me. We take now the destination view controller of the segue, conditionally cast it to a navigation controller, take the property top view controller, and again conditionally cast it to share view controller, which is the class that we created for this purpose. Now we have to pass the proper information to our share view controller. For that we have to create an array of images. We use our convenient function to create 3 images, one with a black background, the next one with a transparent background or blank. For that we have to use a color with an alpha channel of 0. And finally, the third image, which has a white background. Now that we have the 3 images, we pass them to our destination controller as an array, which we create on the fly, putting these 3 images in it. So that's pretty much concludes what we want to do to our main view controller. The share view controller is already set for us, so what's left to do now is to test our app on the simulator. And we start with the iPhone. So the iPhone is coming up. So let's see what happens. We have a problem. The background is always black. And when we go back, we see the white background. This is not exactly what we wanted. The second problem we have, the white background is easy to fix. We just change the sequence of creation of the images so that the last one is black. The first problem is a little trickier. We have here multiple threads, so even if we write that the background must change before we take the snapshot, we are not guaranteed that that happens. In fact, we are taking snapshot of the black background before any change can be finished. To fix that, we have to make the background change atomic. That is, to make sure that this operation finishes before the next one starts. To do that, we use the SCN transaction. We start with the SCN transaction begin, we put the operation we want to be atomic in the middle, and then we finish with a commit. This way we are guaranteed that the next operation happens after this atomic operation is finished. Let's check if that's the case. We run again. We go to our share view, and we see that indeed now we have the proper background for all 3 images. The action button seems to work as well, so we can share this image if we want to. And the background is again black as it was before. So we were able to find some problems and to fix them, at least for the iPhone. Now we have to check that everything runs also okay with an iPad. We switch the simulator to iPad, and we let our app run, the iPad is coming up. So here it is. Let's test the share button. Our action button causes an exception. So we have a problem which seems to be specific to the iPad. Let's try to analyze the stack trace. There is something going on with the UI popover presentation controller, which is lacking a source view or bar button item. Now you remember we did have a bar button item set for this action. Apparently it's not properly recognized. What happens is that the iPad uses a popover for our segue, and that has to be set with an anchor. So this is not done because we did everything in code, so we didn't specify that. So let's fix it. With an optional binding, we check if our controller does have a popover item. If so, we take the appropriate action, which in this case it's only relevant for the iPad. What we do is simply to set our bar button item property to the sender, which is nothing else than our button which started the action in the first place. So now the anchor point for the iPad is properly defined, which should be OK again. Let's check that. So this is our second try with the iPad. Well, the view seems to work OK. The share button gets to the right place. The images are OK. And the action button sets a proper popover, which is dismissed in the case of the iPad just by clicking on the background. We can go back now to the view. Well, at least on the simulator everything seems to run fine. We tried on the iPhone and the iPad. So what we are going to do next is to try this app on a real device. This is the app running on my iPad. So let's hit the share button. Here we have our view to share images, which are properly set. The action button gives us many more options than in the simulator, of course. So we can share to a note or even to Facebook. This is my Facebook account, by the way. But let's do something a little simpler. Let's go back to our action, and we use the copy button here. Now the image is in the clipboard. We go to Keynote. We have already some pictures here. We paste our image. We can resize it. We can move it. As you see, it has no background, so it can be put in front of an existing picture. Now to summarize, we have seen snapshot in action. It returns an image of the 3D view as it is. If we want to change the view, however, just before the snapshot, we have to make sure that this is done in a thread-safe way. The UI activity view controller is very easy to use. We just have to take care of how it is presented on different hardware. Finally, these are the references which I use for this presentation. In the end, you see also the GitHub repository with the code that you have seen in this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.